welcome to the first ever episode of the Human Flourishing Project. I'm your host, Alex Epstein. In this first episode, I want to tell you about the problem that this show exists to solve. And this is the problem that most bothers me in the world, and it's also the problem that most fascinates me in the world. And here's the problem. Human beings lack reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish. Human beings lack reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish. Now, I want to break that down so you understand why I care about this problem so much, and so you actually want to help me solve it. Because as I'll explain over different episodes, this is a problem that's going to require a lot of people getting involved, so I want to get you motivated. So again, it's human beings lack reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish. First, I want to talk about what I mean by flourish, because this is a term we don't hear a lot. It usually has a positive association for people, which I think is right, but I find it very powerful, so I want to explain exactly what I mean. The word flourish comes from the word flower, and it refers to a flower that is at its best, in its state of highest possibility. And therefore, human flourishing means human beings at our best, in our state of highest possibility. And for human beings, our highest state of possibility is very sophisticated, because it isn't just a material state like health or abundance, although it includes those, and it isn't just a mental state like serenity or happiness, although it includes those. It's an integrated state of success, material and mental. Now, historically, human flourishing was almost an impossible dream because we lack two things that are crucial to even reliably survive, let alone flourish, and those are resources and capabilities. Throughout most of history, human beings have had enormous scarcity of the material resources that we need to survive. Food, clothing, shelter, fuel for warmth. We were just lacking these things, and we see in the world even today billions of people lack them, but many of us have them, and that's just this enormous opportunity to flourish that our ancestors did not have. And in addition to resources, human beings have also lacked many of the capabilities that we need to survive, let alone to flourish. We couldn't cope with unfavorable weather. We couldn't cure diseases that today are trivial to us. We couldn't even safely have children. Infant mortality was a huge problem, and mothers dying during childbirth was a huge problem. Now today, it's just important to appreciate life is so amazing in so many ways. We have such an abundance of resources and such an abundance of capabilities that in so much of the world, we have very little trouble surviving materially, at least for many decades. But it's not just that. We can also use these resources and capabilities to enhance our lives mentally. It's not just material. And try this. Think about things that bring you serenity and happiness. And then think about what's the connection between those, and then all of the material resources and capabilities that we have. And I think you'll find that the material resources and capabilities dramatically amplify just about everything else. So, for example, in my case, I'm fanatical about the ocean as a source of beauty and rejuvenation, and I've invested a lot in my life so that I could live by the ocean in Laguna Beach. And I just came out of there maybe 15 minutes ago, and I go at least twice a day whenever I'm in town. And the reason is just because I feel so amazing in the ocean. I just love the beauty of it. I love the feel of it. I sometimes love going snorkeling in it. And just in terms of my mental life is always better when I go in the ocean. So that can seem like, oh, that's not really an issue of resources or capabilities. But it really is. Because I can only do this because I live in a modern civilization. And just one part of that is I live in a civilization that can make Southern California, which is naturally borderline a desert, livable year-round. Now, for those of you who might have heard of me before, by the way, maybe I should introduce myself. My name is Alex Epstein. I think of myself as a practical philosopher, and about 11 years ago, I got really interested in the issue of energy. I realized that energy is the industry that powers every other industry, which means that it's really fundamental to human flourishing. And I found the issue very confusing and concerning because, on the one hand, I knew it was really, really important for everyone to have access to energy. And I realized, wow, billions of people don't have it. But at the same time, I realized that there are all these claims about how our current use of energy, particularly with using fossil fuels, which is by far the leading source of energy today and throughout history, that is connected in many people's minds and in many claims by many prestigious people to future catastrophe. And I was really interested in, how do I think logically about this? How do I make sense of this? How do I get real knowledge of this? And if you're interested in my work, you can Google me, or if maybe many of you listening to this have heard it already. But the reason I bring that up, in part, the reason why it came to mind, is just that in studying energy and its relationship to human flourishing, I see that when people have access to abundant, affordable, reliable energy, it's not just that they can physically survive, but that they can do almost anything else, including the things that make life most meaningful for them. So that's all really, really good news if you're somebody who wants to flourish. There's never been more raw opportunity to flourish. That's the good news. The bad news, which you may have suspected would be coming, is that most of us who live in this modern opportunity-filled world, we still have enormous difficulty flourishing. Now, maybe some of this is exaggerated by the news, because certain news media have incentives to exaggerate bad things. But I think there are a lot of disturbing trends that are definitely the opposite of human flourishing. Mass obesity, mass substance abuse, including what people call the opioid epidemic, so-called screen addiction, which is people using technology in ways that seem really detrimental to their connection to other people and really to their enjoyment of life. Huge difficulties in just us having civilized, constructive conversations with people who disagree with us. This is often called polarization, and it's probably exaggerated the extent to which this is a new thing, but it is really not human flourishing to be in a society where just people can't really talk to each other. So those are some of the things we can observe on a cultural level, but it's probably even more valuable to just think about, okay, individually, do I have trouble flourishing? And I don't want to speak to anyone in the I don't want to speak for anyone in the audience, but certainly in my experience, I'm 30 and now, but particularly in my 20s, this was a real ever-present problem, not just an aspiration, but particularly in the realm of my emotional life. It was something that was often a daily struggle, and that was the opposite of flourishing. And as I'll talk about in a few minutes, something that I just did not know how to make sense of. And I don't think I'm alone in that. So we've got this phenomenon where we've got so much opportunity to flourish, and yet so much less flourishing than we would like to see, both in the world around us and then in our individual lives. And so what do we make of this? Well, sometimes I hear all the struggles people have today in our materially abundant world, and when people talk about them, they attribute it to, quote, the human condition. And there are different versions of this idea, so I don't want to attribute what I'm about to say to all of them, but you often hear that, well, there's just something about human nature that makes flourishing impossible. And I think there's something to this idea of the human condition. There are certain challenges that are maybe inherent in, say, thinking about long-range things versus short-range things. There's certain challenges, for sure, in being a human being. But the idea that we really can't flourish, or that today's standard is anywhere near what's possible, is just extremely, at this point, it's impossible to me, but it's never been very persuasive to me. Because even though flourishing is a lot rarer than I'd like it to be, I've observed, even before I experienced it myself, a lot, which fortunately my life has a lot more of it now than it used to. But even before that, I would see that, hey, other people are clearly flourishing, sometimes overall, and then sometimes at least in aspects of their life that I would really like myself. So I'd see people flourishing in their careers, flourishing in their relationships, flourishing in their family lives, flourishing with their physical health. So there is a real possibility of flourishing. But how do we get there? Well, I think there's some insight in this human condition narrative, because what it really points to is that human flourishing is not automatic. That's definitely true. It's not true that the human condition is going to automatically make us flourish. But it's interesting, that is true for other animals. In a sense, the dog condition or the cat condition is a condition where they can naturally flourish given a certain environment. They're not nearly as good at dealing with different environments as we are, but in the right environment, they're pretty much programmed by instinct to do what they need to do to flourish. And that's just not at all true for human beings. The knowledge we need to flourish is not there. It's not instinctual, and so in action we don't automatically flourish. And we see this with what I was discussing a little earlier. Even if you give us amazing resources and capabilities, we don't automatically know how to use them, and in fact we can easily use them in counterproductive ways. So what we really need is, because we don't have instinctual knowledge of how to flourish, we need acquired knowledge of how to flourish in all different areas. Because we're such sophisticated beings, these material and mental beings, which with such multifaceted lives, that we need very, very sophisticated knowledge. And again, it's not automatic. Which means that if you think about societal priorities, you would think society would be obsessed with, hey, how do we give people this complex knowledge that they need to flourish? How do we do that systematically? It's not automatic, so how do we really deliberately give people reliable access to the knowledge they need to flourish? And it's really upsetting, even if now I think I understand some of the reasons why, which we may talk about in future episodes, but it's really upsetting that human society is not obsessed with real knowledge, with, as I call it, reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish. What we see over and over and over in our lives is that our society, and what I'll sometimes call our knowledge system, the system that's dealing with the knowledge that we need to flourish, and then often dealing with the raw information that we need the knowledge from, it's not obsessed with giving us real knowledge. It's actually obsessed with making new and unreliable claims to knowledge. So there's just always new claims about this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true, but there's just so much contradiction. And it's really frustrating because for sure, there has never been more knowledge in existence about how to flourish. That knowledge is somewhere. It's in people's minds. It might be in books. It may sometimes be implicit in people's actions. We need to figure out what it is, but they're doing something right, and that knowledge is available to us somehow. But the problem is, even though there's more knowledge in existence about how to flourish than there's ever been, there's also more non-knowledge about how to flourish. And that's the big problem, because the knowledge, whatever the real knowledge is, it's drowning in a sea of non-knowledge. And I keep talking about being bothered by this because I, like everyone else, have all kinds of challenges in life, things that I'd like to be better. And I know that with so many of them, it doesn't require me to discover the solution for the first time. Somebody somewhere has those answers, but it's so damn hard to get them because of this ocean of non-knowledge that the knowledge is drowning in. And think of pretty much any field you want your life to be better in, or you want the world to be better in. It's so hard to find what's really right, what's really going to lead to flourishing. This is true of relationships, but think about something like foreign policy. right now it's August 1st, 2018. I should say this is my 38th birthday today, and I'm the thing I wanted most was to have this show ready to record. So I'm very, very happy about that. But just to put this in time, in case you're listening to this much later, and I hope many people are listening to this much later, in addition to soon, we have, say, controversies about what to do about Russia. And that's super hard to know. What do we do? But it's just, let's say this is something maybe I've researched in the past, so maybe I have some insight, but just for a normal person, you're talking about something that's just completely life and death. We could get in a war maybe, or maybe we need to get in a war to prevent something worse. But it's so hard, and this knowledge matters so much, and it's so frustrating. Or environmental issues. I mentioned energy issues before. Those are often connected to environmental issues. What's the truth about those? Or if you're in business management issues, just how do you actually run a business? There's just this sea of conflicting claims, and it's so hard to know what to do. But as bad as those are, and I'm sure you can think of more, and at the end I'm going to want to know what areas of life do you most want real knowledge in. But for me, maybe the two ones that I find, the two examples, the two areas of life that I find particularly painful in terms of how difficult it is to get real knowledge are nutrition and psychology, because these are so important to our ability to flourish, and it's so hard to know what's right. So I'll start with nutrition. Now, nutrition studies the effects of different foods on our bodies, short-term and long-term. And this matters so much because if we can get real knowledge of nutrition, we should be able to eat in a way that will keep us healthy and attractive and satisfied. But in my experience, and from what I know in most people's experience, this is really hard to know what to do, and we have all sorts of struggles with nutrition. I'm definitely not one of those people with a naturally amazing metabolism. So from a pretty young age, I was interested in at least the attractiveness piece of the puzzle, which may not be the most important, but it is an important one, and it's connected to the others. And it's just, hey, to put it bluntly, hey, I feel fatter than I would like to be. What do I do? And then later it's, okay, well, what do I do so I can live longer? This may affect years added to my life. I'm not sure, but it may well do that. It certainly affects how I feel on a day-to-day basis. But it's just so hard to know what's right. Just think about the claims that you hear today from really smart people. I hear, well, potatoes will make me fat and they're unhealthy, to potatoes are the perfect food. Or bacon is going to clog my arteries versus bacon is going to slim my waistline. Or fruit is vital to fruit has too much sugar, you should avoid it. And like many people, I've tried all kinds of diets, almost all of which had some problem or another, including that they're hard to stick to. And that's a whole other area of knowledge, by the way, that's really important. How do you apply knowledge once you have it? But one thing that makes it really hard to apply knowledge is if you're not sure it's non-knowledge. So if I'm on some diet, some regimen, and I don't really know that it's making me healthy, I don't have good confidence, then if I'm tempted to do something else, well, what's going to stop me? I'm not even that confident in it in the first place. So it would be just incredibly helpful if I had confidence. Now, the usual thing, when you hear people talk about, hey, I didn't know what to do, it's often a very good marketing technique for people who say they have the solutions. And surely some people do have solutions, so I don't resent that. But my point here is not, hey, I had this problem and I solved it and now I'm going to sell you the solution. Although I do think that I've learned certain things, or I think I've learned certain things that at least seem to be working well for me. But the real problem is I don't really know still. That's what I want to sell you on. I want to sell you on the problem that we don't really know. We don't have reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish, and we should be really concerned about that, and we should really be looking for solutions to that. So that's nutrition. And I mentioned psychology. That's an area that's just as important as nutrition, and it's even less appreciated, and it's just as hard to find real knowledge. Psychology studies mental health, especially how to have a healthy relationship with emotions. And just think about how crucial this is to human flourishing. This is subject matter that affects your entire experience of life. My psychology is something that it's my mind, but particularly how I'm experiencing the world emotionally, how that interacts with my thoughts. That is just so central to flourishing. And in this case, it's a subject that I think is just underappreciated as a subject. I certainly didn't even realize it really mattered until I desperately needed it. And this was in my mid-20s, and I started experiencing intense anxiety, and I just did not understand what was going on, and I certainly didn't know how to deal with it. And if you've ever experienced anything like this, I'm guessing a lot of you have, that is just one of the worst positions to be in, where there's some sort of suffering and you really don't want it, and you want to get out of it, and you just don't know how. And so I like to consider myself a student of life. I like to try to figure out the knowledge that I need to flourish. So I started researching it, but it was like nutrition in so many ways. There were so many contradictory claims that were hard to make sense of, like, should I take medication? Shouldn't I? And let's just think of that one. It's potential, well, maybe the right medication could really help and the wrong one could really be bad, or you could get dependent on it, or it could make things worse. These are they're life and death decisions, or at least they're huge flourishing or non-flourishing decisions, and it's so hard to know. And then you may say, well, look, the problem is solved because you just know, well, go to a therapist, and they're an expert, and that's the way you're going to get reliable access to knowledge. And there's something there. The expert can help a lot, but in psychology, there are all sorts of different experts who are coming from all sorts of different conflicting schools. Some say medication is inherently bad. Some say it's good. Some are likely to diagnose the same person in different ways and prescribe completely different forms of treatment. So even what therapist to choose, that was an incredibly, incredibly hard thing to figure out. And what happened is I ended up doing all kinds of trial and error and eventually made progress in a lot of different ways. And I learned certain things that I think are general, and at least certain things that are specific to me. But I don't really know with a lot of these things because I just don't feel like I have enough access. Although certain of the things we're going to talk about in the next episode in terms of systems and frameworks have helped me get way past where I was at the beginning in terms of differentiating knowledge from non-knowledge. But it's still really hard. It's not like I have the magic solution for you, but I'm trying to have you respect this problem, that we need a kind of access that we don't have, and that as a society and as individuals, we need to focus on this a lot. And in my experience, I went through a lot of trial and error. It was very expensive in time and in money, and for much of that time, I did not have a lot of money, so it was very difficult kind of thing, almost a scary expense. And the whole experience was scary because going the wrong route can make bad suffering even worse. And I think that my experience is probably way above average in terms of how much my life improved, how much my ability to be serene improved, and that itself was rough. So I really would like if I could talk to my equivalent when I was 18, I would really like to help that person avoid a lot of these difficulties and get a lot closer to real knowledge. So again, in psychology, as in so many other fields connected to human flourishing, we lack reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish. So at this point, I hope you're asking, okay, how do we solve this massive problem? And part of my answer is, well, I just did the first step, which is to bring the massiveness of the problem to your attention. I have a very strong belief that I've developed, particularly in working on business problems over the years, because while I do philosophy, I do it a lot through a business, which is a whole big subject of how those interact. But I've found that to solve a problem, I first must respect the problem. I must understand it. I must appreciate it, because only then am I really going to figure something out or start to figure something out that's going to really deal with it. If I underestimate the problem or trivialize the problem, then I'm going to come up with a trivial solution that doesn't change the problem. It just makes me not successfully deal with it. So at this point, I'll consider myself a success if you're really bothered by the problem of us not having reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish. That I consider success, and I hope you're positively excited about seeking real knowledge about how to flourish, because that's the purpose of this show, and that's the purpose of what I call the Human Flourishing Project more broadly. We're seeking real knowledge about how to flourish. That's what we're seeking, and I believe that it is possible to get it on so much of a higher level than we are now. And in next week, in what I'm considering part 2 of this introduction to the Human Flourishing Project, I'm thinking of this as 3 parts. Next week, I'm going to share my basic approach to solving it. And maybe I'm doing this because I want you to listen more, but the real reason I'm just focusing today on the problem is because I think that's an important enough chunk by itself, and I think it's something that we need to appreciate and start thinking about in our lives. And one thing I've noticed with listening to different content and reading different content is sometimes people cover too much at once, and if they cover too many points, then I'm not clear on what to take away and not clear on what to do. So with this show, I really want to keep it to around 30 minutes, maybe 20 minutes an episode, so you have really clear takeaways, and then hopefully some really clear actions you can take to start making use of the knowledge. So let's just talk about the takeaways for today. I'd give us 3. The overall one, if you want the overall one, is the problem that this show exists to solve is human beings lack reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish. That's the overall. But if we want to divide that up, takeaway 1 is that human flourishing is integrated success, material and mental. So human flourishing is integrated success, material and mental. Takeaway 2 is that we have more opportunity than ever to flourish thanks to today's incredible resources and capabilities. We have more opportunity than ever to flourish thanks to today's incredible resources and capabilities. And then takeaway 3 is the fundamental thing we're missing is reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish. Emphasis on knowledge. Whatever resources and capabilities we have, if we don't have the right knowledge, we're not going to be able to flourish. If we do have the right knowledge, then everything is going to get better. So that's what we have to fall in love with, is the prospect of getting this knowledge. Now, I mentioned I not only like to have takeaways, I like to have next actions, because I think that knowledge, if it's really significant to your life, should have immediate action implications. And for me, when I learn something that's valuable, I want something that I can do to immediately take action and incorporate it in my life. So I have 2 thoughts on actions you can take based on today's subject matter that may be really beneficial. So the first is make a list of 7 words that best capture what you think human flourishing consists of. Make a list of 7 words that best capture what you think human flourishing consists of. Because human flourishing is this big concept. We've talked about it in broad terms, but we need to think about, in general and individually, okay, what does this really mean? And so this might not be your final analysis. Hopefully you'll think and rethink about this over time, but I think it's good to try to boil it down to 7 words. So it may have serenity or joy, growth, productivity. I'm not saying those are mine. I'll share 7 of mine next week, but think about that. And then the second is name 3 areas of life, or at least one, but preferably 3 areas of life where you most urgently want reliable access to the knowledge of how to flourish. So what areas of life matter most to you, and do you feel like you're most lacking it? Is it nutrition, psychology, relationships, foreign policy, something else? Naming those, I think, will start to activate you in looking for better knowledge. And then you might start looking at different people's claims, and you might start seeing, oh, wow, this person makes more sense, this person makes less sense. And then I think that'll be helped a lot by next week where we'll talk about certain methods and systems you can use to, among other things, separate knowledge from non-knowledge. Now, with both of these exercises, the 7 words and the 3 areas of life, what I think would be amazing is if you'd be willing to post the answers on our Facebook page, where we're going to have these questions listed. And it's facebook.com/the Human Flourishing Project. No, that is wrong. Strike that. It is facebook.com/Human Flourishing Project. Facebook.com/Human Flourishing Project. As I'll discuss in coming episodes, a big part of seeking real knowledge about how to flourish is going to be sharing ideas and best practices with other people. And particularly, I like the term students of life. I think that's the audience of this program, is students of life, and that really should be all of us. I don't think it's enough of us, but that's what I like to think of myself as, and I hope that's what you are and what we aspire to be better, students of life. And I think we can learn a lot by sharing our best practices and sharing our recommendations, particularly if it's focused in this way. So I think it would be great to see lots and lots of people name their 7 words, name their 3 areas. That's only going to help other people. It's only going to help me in my study of human flourishing, which is what this whole show is designed to accelerate, and ultimately so that we all have this knowledge that we really want, but have such inadequate access to. So I really hope that you go to that Facebook page. If you don't have Facebook, in the future, I'm sure there will be other platforms, and we'll put this on YouTube and you can comment there. But for now, if you go to that Facebook page to comment and interact, that's going to be the hub. I think Facebook is imperfect, but for community stuff, I think it's really, really good. And even for my personal Facebook page, I've learned a ton from my Facebook friends just discussing issues like this. So I'm really excited to see what different Facebook people put on this. Now, I'm not recommending being on Facebook all the time. That's the subject of a future episode. But if you have one set time a day where it's not interrupting other things, I hope that interacting with the Human Flourishing Project Facebook page is just an awesome part of your Facebook use. So that's pretty much it. If you found this first episode intriguing, please share it with friends and encourage them to join the discussion. If you can think of people who are also students of life who would find this problem really compelling, who are interested in how to solve it for themselves, for others, that would be great. I think that this is the kind of thing where hopefully there are a lot of people who are passionate about this, who become passionate about this, who share it via word of mouth, and we can just start an amazing conversation and build this in all kinds of ways. In the next episode, and particularly the one after that, I'll tell you about some of my plans, but hopefully today is just enough to get you excited that someone is tackling this subject matter, and I really want it to be on the level of a community. Now, one more thing in terms of resources, to make sure you're notified about this show and anything else we do with the Human Flourishing Project, just go to humanflourishingproject.com and enter in your email address and you'll be set. That'll make sure that every week you know about the latest episode. We're planning on doing one every Friday. I like Friday because Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, those are the days of the week where you have the most potential altitude on your life, where you can really reflect, where you can plan. So I want to release it on a Friday, give you the whole weekend to think about it, to apply it. Eventually, I'll probably do daily Q&A. But first things first, I just want to get this weekly experience locked in and start to build for you a mental environment that's really going to help you flourish. And it's the kind of mental environment I would have wanted 20 years ago. It's the one I still want now. And I hope that your participation in the community helps create my own mental environment. And that, to me, would just be incredibly exciting. So next week, we're going to do part 2 of this introduction, where I'm going to be discussing what I think are the keys to actually solving this problem, to getting the reliable knowledge we need to flourish. Until then, I'm Alex Epstein. This has been the Human Flourishing Project.